Howdy y'all, and welcome back to Country Fried Minis. I'm your host Cameron, the country boy in the big city, presenting to you once again from the Bullshit Corner 2.0, and today I'd like to talk to y'all about Colin McLaren. Now, as some of you might already know, Catalyst Games recently put out a 28mm scale Marauder for their game MechWarrior Destiny over at Adepticon. Now, I couldn't make it over to Adepticon, so I decided to print one out at home. I just downloaded one of Matt Mason's fabulous MAD-3R Marauders and scaled it up 4.6 times and printed it out on my Anycubic Photon. Now, it turned out to be a ton of work, and I had to slice it into something like 9 parts and then an additional replacement part, but it was really doable and super attainable, and I'm going to show y'all how I did it. Alrighty then folks, just as was the case with the Big Urban Mech project, this big chassis has been printed out using my resin printers in multiple pieces. Anytime you print out parts in this fashion, they're going to have some remnants of the support structures which are absolutely going to need removal. So to facilitate that, we're going to get out our trusty Army Painter files and get to work smoothing out all these little offending nublets. And, of course, before I get too far into this process, I would be remiss if I didn't take some time and an obtrusive splash screen and remind y'all that you should 100% be wearing a respirator while working with resin parts. The small scale super fine particulate matter that comes off of these bits can absolutely create long-term health complications, and these problems can be simply avoided by wearing that mask. From here, I need to get out my Dremel to make a correction to this here model. While printing out the foot of this MAD-3R Marauder, a portion of one of the toes partially failed during the process. It's warped real bad and is going to need a complete replacement. Once we slap in the battery of this here rechargeable tool, we can go ahead and pull out the part in question and give it a look-see. It looks real bad, but with some careful effort, we can manage this toe replacement. For this, I've printed out an extra copy of that toe, but it needs to get attached to the model, so we'll carefully measure where it goes and cut off the old one with a cut-off wheel rotary bit. We'll just mark that position with an initial notch and then slowly work our way all around that toe until it is fully removed from the model. Since this print has real thin walls, just a couple of millimeters in fact, it doesn't give too much resistance and cuts away really easily. Just a few passes and this lame toe is ready to have its sturdy replacement. With that surgery complete, we might as well continue using this handy dandy power tool while we got it out. A few of the parts aren't fitting too well due to a bit of warpage, so it'll do to cut out the offending panels such as the inside of these two halves of the torso. After just a few passes of the cutting wheel, the offending surfaces no longer have any warping and will fit together nice and snugly. This correction was needed on the torso as well as the pelvis and the shin connections, but all in all, this didn't take but about 10 minutes to cut out all the problematic spots. Alrighty, looking real good there. Just a few more... shit. Now that we've got all that cutting and filing out of the way, we're going to scrub down the surface of this model using an old toothbrush and some 90% concentration isopropyl alcohol. We need this model completely cleaned up because from here, it's time to start putting all the parts together. First, as I start working on this here assembly process, I'd like to tell y'all to take note of the glue that I've decided to use. In this particular case, I find that super thin glue is the best option to facilitate the next step. In my case, I couldn't find a hobby brand that was extra thin, so instead I opted for a few tubes of crazy glue, which is a real runny consistency. So if you find yourself unable to locate the glue you need at your local hobby store, it's worth remembering that these here tiny tubes of cheap glue have that properly low viscosity. Digressing, y'all can see that I've been pouring some powder onto the joins of this model. That powder in question is baking soda, which not only helps to cure up that super glue instantly, but also creates a strong plastic-like texture which both increases the strength of the bond as well as cures into a surface that can be sanded later. I've seen this technique a few times in crafting videos here on YouTube, but I had totally forgotten about this technique during the Urban Mech video. A kind viewer mentioned this in the comments of that video, and it was thanks to this reminder that I was able to apply the technique this time around. This technique turned out to be a better method than the haphazard approach that I took on the Urban Mech, and the thin cyanoacrylate glue was well able to minimize the size of the connections and the gaps, while also penetrating deeply into the baking soda, which made the joins extremely strong. Now at this stage, she's got all the basic assembly complete, but she's still not quite ready for paint. She's still got some really ugly seam lines from that buildup of the baking soda and super glue. So to solve that, we're going to go ahead and get out our Dremel and grind off those ugly seam lines and get her ready for painting. Alrighty, before we can get started on the next bit of work, it'll do to clean up the workstation. I picked up this handy little hand vacuum recently, and I'm gonna put it to work sucking up all that excess baking soda before moving forward. This way I don't get a mildly caustic chemical all over my hands and forearms as I work. That cleaning complete, it's time to get back out the Dremel rotary tool, this time with a stone grinding bit, and start smoothing through all those rough connections built up with superglue and baking soda. As I mentioned earlier, this stuff is quite sandable, and for that, smooths out real well, especially with a grinded bit on this here Dremel 7300 cordless rotary tool. We'll just smooth it out until good enough is good enough, and then it's going to be another round of cleaning this here model up with 90% concentration isopropyl alcohol. What y'all think of them tracer effects this time around? I think they're kind of fun. With both the assembly and the seam grinding complete, now we can go ahead and put her in the spray booth and give her a prime coat. As with any priming project here in the Bullshit Corner 2.0, we're going to start up with a coating of Stynylrez primer. In this case, our initial layer is going to be black since this legendary mech belongs to the Black Widows Company, a semi-independent unit within the larger mercenary unit Wolf's Dragoon. For that, we need this black mech to be black, so we're going to start up this here priming job with black primer. So we'll spray this jet coloration all over the model in several thin coats, ensuring to get complete coverage. This will not only do a significant portion of the heavy lifting for us, but will act as a deep shadow in any recesses where we fail to get adequate coverage of later colors. Even though this is a black mech, we don't necessarily want to paint it just solid black, instead opting to get a bit of contrast onto the base color. To make this happen, once we've cleaned out the airbrush, we'll mix up a blend of Stynylrez black and gray and apply a top-down zenithal coat, mimicking the natural play of light on its upper surfaces. With that nice solid zenithal prime coat applied and cured, it's time to get out the wet palette and start layering this bad boy up. In no time, she's going to be looking great, but first we got to put those initial layers on, the edge highlights, and a little bit of ink washing. With all the painting and priming complete, let's hydrate this here wet palette and blast through the base coating, edge highlighting, and ink washing in this sick montage. Alright, let's freehand. With all the painting work out of the way that's common to every project, let's talk about the uncommon features this time around. Since this is a big model, we're going to do some freehand details, and I'm going to take a moment to insist that you too can achieve passable work with just a bit of patience. First up, we need to determine the primary color of the background of our image, in this case the same red as we used before, and paint on that area really carefully. From here, just get out your sharpest brush, in my case this 20-0 liner by Princeton, and start sketching on the shapes really carefully. Something like this spider is really easy to achieve, as we'll just break down all the black portions into simple shapes and paint them on. A pair of circles for the body, several segmented lines for the legs, and then 2 tiny protrusions for the fangs. After that, it's just a matter of painting on that red hourglass. The best thing about this whole process is that it's just paint, so you can easily go back over any mistakes that you've made. Just like with the spider, we're going to paint on these red number 2 numerals real carefully and then go around the outside with the super sharp brush in black. After just a bit of effort, they're looking mighty good. We'll apply the same approach to McLaren's name on the side of the torso, featuring a simple red box with standard handwriting letters spelling out the legendary mech warrior's name. Finally, the last freehand element on this MAD-3R Marauder is going to be the Wolf's Dragoon symbol. This one's a little more complicated and has a very specific shape, so it helps to keep a reference image nearby while working on it. That said, it's just a matter of carefully laying out the shapes with a sharp brush and thin paint, and in no time, it's looking great. Plus, once again, you can always paint over any mistakes you make, going back and forth until you get it right. And naturally, just remember to be happy while you're painting. This portion of today's video has been brought to you by Aries Games and Miniatures. Howdy y'all, I'm here to interrupt your regularly scheduled broadcast to tell you all about Aries Games and Minis, my favorite online Battletech retailer. Now y'all might remember Aries Games and Minis from the last ad I run for them, wherein I talked about their fabulous selection of Ironwind Metals models, of which there's over 2,000 individual items on offer. Over 700 of those are going to be online exclusives. I can't think of a better place to fill out your ranks with these fabulous blister packs full of wonderful pewter models, but that's not all today. Aries Games and Minis has gone above and beyond and is offering some lovely discounts. Just look for the discounted and sales items in individual categories to add them to your cart. That's going to include stuff such as Pokemon and Thunderhead Studios for 25% off, as well as the Army Painter and Feldhair for a mind-blowing 35% off. Furthermore, with the Battle of Tukey fast approaching, I can't think of a better place to fill out your ranks than here at Aries Games and Minis, so why not show them a little extra love and pick up maybe their exclusive sculpt, the Aries, some apparel, or some gift cards to get your friends and family into this lovely game that is Battletech. Furthermore, Aries Games and Minis has partnered with Country Fried Minis to offer you an additional 5% at checkout. Just use the code COUNTRYFRIED at checkout. That's COUNTRYFRIED, no space. And once again, a special thanks to Aries for sponsoring this ad. And now back to the video. Now that we've got all the detail work done on the model, it's time to start weathering her up. To achieve this, I'm going to trust in my favorite method and create a grime wash out of oil paints. The first step in this process is going to be hitting the model all over with a shiny shellac of gloss varnish. I prefer to use this here Winsor & Newton Galleria varnish out of the old airbrush. Once this chassis is fully coated with a slick and shiny top coat, we'll let that sit aside and cure up while simultaneously mixing up our oil wash. As always, my preferred recipe is going to be a mix of lamp black and burnt sienna to get a real dirty looking black brown. Simply squeeze some of the paint out onto some standard corrugated cardboard and let it sit for a while. This will help to pull out most of the linseed oil and facilitate the speed with which these paints will dry. After about 2 hours or so of drying out, these here goo blobs are ready to be added into some white spirit. Just get you a disposable container like this here Party Favor shot glass and add in some clean mineral spirits. From here, we'll just use an old paintbrush to mix up this gooey paste into the solvent until it makes a nice runny grime wash. Now, it's just a simple matter of glopping this heavily all over every surface of the model until it's cruddy and dark and almost looks ruined. And of course, don't worry about your detail efforts so far, as we'll clean up a good portion of this here mess wash. Just trust in the process. Of course, while that dries, it's time for a brief break. Yeah, I got you good, Zubat. At this point, I was really disappointed with my results in the oil wash. After wiping it down, it didn't scream grimy to me. It needed some more work. It needed some more grime, some dirt in the corners. So I thought I'd include this here segment and share how to double down on that dirtying down. For that matter, it's just a matter of putting her back into the spray booth and adding a second layer of varnish. Then we'll mix up another heavier gloopy glop wash in exactly the same fashion as before, just with a much blacker concentration. Wait a moment. What have I done? This thing, it's completely black. Boy, I hope I can recover this. At this point, with that goopy grime wash, unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave this episode on a bit of a cliffhanger because the whole thing turned out to be about 22 hours worth of footage so we could put it together. I talked to a good friend of mine and he thought it was best to break it down into 2 episodes, and I'm inclined to agree. That way people watch and can get all the information they'd like to out of this episode. So, unfortunately, you're going to have to catch us next time on Country Fried Minis and see how it turns out. And, of course, as always, I want y'all to remember to be happy while you're painting. Take it easy, fellers. See you around next time.